My cousin sent me a clip of my family saying she doesn't do enough. So I'm Kelly, 34 years old, a nurse practitioner who moved back to my hometown 2 years ago after my father suddenly passed away. What started as temporary support for my grieving mother and struggling brother turned into me paying most of their bills while putting my own life on hold. Then last month, my cousin Taylor sent me a video that shattered everything I thought I knew about my family. If you've ever felt taken for granted by the people you love most, let me know where you're watching from. And hit subscribe because what I did next changed everything in ways I never expected. Before all this happened, I had built a pretty good life for myself in Seattle. After nursing school, I worked my way up to become a nurse practitioner at one of the city's top hospitals. I specialized in emergency medicine, which was challenging but incredibly fulfilling. I had great colleagues, a nice apartment overlooking the water, and was even saving for a down payment on my own condo. Everything changed with one phone call. "Kelly, your dad had a heart attack. The ambulance is taking him to Memorial now." I still remember exactly where I was standing when my mother Sandra called me that day. I was in the break room at work holding a half-eaten sandwich, and suddenly my entire world shifted. I flew home that night, but I was too late. My father, the strongest man I knew, was gone at 62. The days after his funeral were a blur of paperwork casseroles from neighbors, and the dawning realization that my family was in trouble. My mother at 58 had only been working part-time at the local grocery store for the past decade. My father had handled all their finances, and without his income from the factory where he'd worked for 30 years, she was lost. Then there was my younger brother, Jake. At 29, he was still living at home, supposedly building his graphic design business, but mostly just between jobs, as he liked to call it. He had talent, but not much drive, and Dad had always been too soft on him. "I just need a little time to figure things out." My mother said, her eyes red from crying, sitting at the kitchen table where I'd eaten breakfast every morning of my childhood. The mortgage, the bills. I don't even know where to start. What was I supposed to do? Leave them. I took a leave of absence from my job, which turned into a resignation when I realized how bad things really were. I found a position at the local hospital in my Pennsylvania hometown. The pay was significantly less than what I made in Seattle, but the cost of living was lower too. "It's just temporary," I told myself, "until Mom gets back on her feet, until Jake finds steady work." I found a small apartment about 10 minutes from my childhood home and started picking up extra shifts whenever I could. At first, I just helped with the essentials: groceries, utilities, the mortgage payment when Mom came up short, which was most months. Then Jake's car broke down and he needed transportation for job interviews, so I covered the repairs. When winter came and the heating bill skyrocketed, I paid that too. Before I knew it, I was covering 70% of my mother's mortgage, all of the utilities, Jake's car payments, and countless other emergencies that seemed to pop up monthly. My own dreams were quietly put on hold. The down payment fund for my own place stopped growing and started shrinking. My plans to pursue an advanced degree gathered dust. The vintage Mustang I'd lovingly restored in college sat in the garage unused until I eventually sold it to cover Jake's rent after a failed attempt at getting his own place. He moved back in with Mom after just 3 months. There were subtle signs that my help was becoming expected rather than appreciated. My birthday passed without acknowledgement while we celebrated Jake's with an expensive dinner. My mother called at the last minute, asking for money for gifts for other family members. When I couldn't make family dinners because of work, there were guilt trips instead of understanding. My cousin Taylor noticed before I did. We'd always been close, just 2 months apart in age, more like sisters than cousins. She lived an hour away, but came back for family gatherings. "Kelly, I'm worried about you," she said during one of our coffee dates. "You look exhausted, and I don't like how they're treating you." I defended them, of course. "They're still grieving Taylor. Mom's depression has been really bad, and Jake just needs some time to find his footing. Dad always handled everything, and now they're lost." Taylor gave me a look I didn't fully understand at the time. "Just be careful you don't become their permanent solution. It's been 6 months already." 6 months became a year, then 2 years, and somewhere along the way, what had started as temporary assistance became expected support. The pandemic hit, and as a healthcare worker, my life became even more chaotic. 12-hour shifts turned into 14 or 16 hours. I came home dead on my feet only to find bills on my counter and voicemails about what my family needed. Kelly, honey, the refrigerator is making that noise again. I think we need a new one. The repairman said it would cost almost as much to fix as replace. Sis, I need to borrow 2,000 for this marketing course. It's going to be the thing that finally gets my business off the ground. I can pay you back in 3 months tops. The requests kept coming, and I kept saying yes because what else could I do? They were family. But something was changing in their attitude toward me. The gratitude became less evident, the entitlement more pronounced. At family gatherings, my extended family would praise Jake for applying to 3 whole jobs that month, while my 60-hour work weeks and financial support went unmentioned. Taylor's concern grew more pointed. They're using you, Kelly. You know that, right? When was the last time either of them even said thank you? I couldn't remember, and that scared me. But what scared me more was the thought of what would happen to them if I stopped helping. So I kept going, kept working, kept paying, even as resentment began to build in my chest like a gathering storm. The weight of supporting my family was becoming unbearable. What had started as a temporary solution had turned into a 2-year burden that was crushing me financially and emotionally. The 6 months I'd planned to stay and help had stretched into 24 months of increasingly demanding support. During the pandemic, my job as a nurse practitioner became even more grueling. I worked in the COVID ward for months, suited up in PPE that left bruises on my face, watching patients struggle to breathe, while my own life felt like it was suffocating under obligations. I'd come home after 14-hour shifts, sometimes crying in my car, before I could summon the energy to walk into my apartment, only to find voicemails from my mother or brother about some new financial crisis they needed me to solve. My savings account, once robust enough for a down payment on a home in Seattle, had dwindled to almost nothing. I'd sold my vintage Mustang, a 1967 beauty I'd restored with my own hands during college, to cover Jake's rent when he attempted to move out on his own. He'd signed a year lease on an apartment, furnished it with new items on credit cards, then lost his job after 2 months. I covered his rent for another month before he sheepishly moved back to Mom's house, leaving me with nothing to show for my sacrifices, except an empty garage space and lighter bank account. Mom, I think maybe it's time we talk about a budget for you, I suggested one Sunday afternoon, sitting at her kitchen table with a stack of bills. I've been looking at your expenses, and there are some areas where we could cut back. My mother's face immediately darkened. You sound just like those financial advice people on TV. We're not wasteful, Kelly. We're struggling since your father died. You have no idea what it's like to lose the love of your life. Her words stung, dismissing both my loss of my father and my legitimate financial concerns. Jake walked in fresh from sleeping until noon and grabbed a soda from the refrigerator. What's going on? He asked, sensing the tension. Your sister thinks we're spending too much money, my mother said, her voice carrying a wounded tone that immediately put Jake on the defensive. Seriously, Kel Mom just bought groceries and some new towels for the bathroom. It's not like she's out buying diamonds, Jake said, rolling his eyes. Not everyone can be Miss Perfect with a fancy medical job. I sat there stunned into silence. The fancy medical job that was paying for the roof over his head, the car he drove, and the food in his refrigerator. The job that had me working 60-hour weeks while he struggled to find even part-time employment. The job I'd taken at a significant pay cut to be close to them after Dad died. The conversation devolved from there, with both of them painting me as controlling and out of touch with their struggles. I left feeling like I was the villain for even suggesting financial responsibility. The next week, my mother called about new kitchen appliances. The stove was outdated, the microwave too small. The following month, she mentioned a vacation to Myrtle Beach that she and Jake were planning to heal. We need this, Kelly. The grief counselor said a change of scenery would be good for us, she explained, as if that settled the matter of who would pay for this healing excursion. I said yes, again, because saying no meant being the cold-hearted daughter who didn't understand grief, who didn't care enough about her family's emotional well-being. Jake's financial irresponsibility reached new heights. He started a podcast about entrepreneurship that required expensive equipment. He joined a multi-level marketing company selling wellness products, which somehow required him to put thousands of dollars on credit cards for inventory. Each venture was going to be the one that finally launched his success, and each one fizzled within weeks, leaving more debt that somehow became my problem. Meanwhile, Taylor watched with increasing alarm. This isn't sustainable, Kelly, she said during one of our phone calls. You're drowning to keep them afloat and they're not even trying to swim. What am I supposed to do? Let them lose the house? Let Jake's credit be ruined forever? I asked, though the questions were becoming harder to answer convincingly. Maybe they need to face some consequences. Taylor suggested gently. Your dad protected them from reality for years, and now you're doing the same thing. I knew she was right, but breaking the pattern felt impossible. The dynamic was so deeply ingrained. At family gatherings, I noticed how my extended family treated us differently. Jake would be praised extensively for the smallest efforts. Oh, you applied for that management position at the store. That's wonderful. Or, your new podcast logo looks so professional. Meanwhile, my contributions went unmentioned. No one acknowledged the promotions I'd earned at work, the extra certification I'd completed, or the fact that I was essentially supporting 3 adults on one income. It was as if my success was expected, and therefore unremarkable, while Jake's smallest steps forward were celebrated as exceptional achievements. The resentment grew inside me, a quiet poison. I started having trouble sleeping, grinding my teeth so badly, my dentist recommended a night guard. I lost weight without trying, sometimes forgetting to eat during my long shifts, or being too tired to bother when I got home. And through it all, a question kept surfacing in my mind. Am I enabling them? When I tentatively suggested that Jake might look into job training programs, or that my mother consider increasing her hours at the grocery store, I was met with defensiveness and guilt trips. I raised you for 18 years without complaining, my mother would say, as if my childhood had been a favor rather than a parental responsibility. Not everyone can be a super achiever like you, Jake would sneer, turning my success into something to be resented rather than respected. The breaking point was coming. I could feel it approaching like distant thunder, but I had no idea how devastatingly it would arrive. The video that changed everything came on a Tuesday evening in April. I had missed a family dinner at my Aunt Laura's house because of an emergency shift at the hospital. A 16-year-old boy had been in a car accident, and I stayed 2 hours past the end of my shift to make sure he was stabilized before I left. By the time I got home, it was past 10, and I collapsed into bed without even checking my phone. The next morning, I woke to several missed calls from Taylor, and a text that simply read, "You need to see this, I'm sorry." Attached was a video file. I pressed play, still groggy from too little sleep, unprepared for what I was about to witness. The video showed my family gathered in Aunt Laura's kitchen after dinner. The camera seemed to be positioned on a counter, partially hidden behind a fruit bowl, capturing the scene without anyone noticing. Taylor must have set it up, though I wouldn't understand why until later. My mother was loading the dishwasher while Jake leaned against the counter, scrolling through his phone. Aunt Laura was wrapping leftovers, and I could see Uncle Phil sitting at the kitchen table. Their voices were clear in the quiet kitchen. "Did Kelly get stuck at work again?" Aunt Laura asked, pressing plastic wrap over a bowl. My mother sighed dramatically. "Of course, always work before family, though she never misses an opportunity to remind us how much she helps out financially." I felt like I'd been slapped. I had never not once thrown my financial support in their faces. In fact, I went out of my way to be discreet about it, often transferring money directly to accounts or paying bills online without mentioning it. "Kelly thinks her money makes her better than us," my mother continued, her tone bitter. "Ever since she went off to college and got that fancy degree." Jake looked up from his phone with a snort. "She's always been controlling. Dad would have hated what she's become, always holding it over our heads when she helps out." My breath caught in my throat. Dad would have hated what I've become. Dad, who had taught me the value of hard work, who had been so proud when I got my nursing license, who called me his brilliant girl even when I was 32 years old. But it got worse. "She doesn't do enough considering how much she makes," Aunt Laura chimed in, sealing containers with sharp, angry movements. "All those bonuses and overtime, and she complains about helping her own mother with basic necessities." When had I ever complained I'd taken a pay cut to move back, sold my car, given up my dreams of homeownership, worked until I was half dead during a global pandemic, all without a single word of complaint to them? Uncle Phil, whom I'd always thought was on my side, nodded along. "She's just the last resort when Jake's business plans fall through. But she acts like she's the only one making sacrifices. Your father supported your sister through nursing school, didn't he? She's just returning the favor." The family continued, each comment more hurtful than the last, painting me as selfish, controlling, and inadequate despite all I'd done. Jake mocked my savior complex. My mother lamented how I'd changed since moving back, becoming cold and judgmental. Aunt Laura suggested I was just helping the family to show off how successful I was compared to Jake. And throughout it all, there was laughter, nods of agreement, more stories about how difficult, how disappointing, how ungenerous I was, despite my big nurse practitioner paycheck. By the time the video ended, I was shaking. Physical symptoms of shock rolled through me: nausea, dizziness, a strange ringing in my ears. I had to sit down on the edge of my bed, my phone clutched so tightly in my hand that my knuckles turned white. I called Taylor immediately. "Why would you send me this?" I asked when she picked up, my voice strangled and unfamiliar even to my own ears. "Because you needed to know the truth," Taylor said firmly. "I've been watching them take advantage of you for 2 years, Kelly. I've tried telling you, but you wouldn't listen. I thought seeing it for yourself might finally make you understand what's happening. You set up a camera in Aunt Laura's kitchen." I was still struggling to process everything. "My phone. I propped it up when I went to get dessert from the dining room," Taylor admitted. "I heard them starting to talk about you, and I couldn't let it continue without you knowing. You deserve better, Kelly." I ended the call shortly after, unable to talk anymore. I called in sick to work for the first time in years, claiming a stomach virus. It wasn't entirely a lie. I was physically ill from what I'd witnessed. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the cruel words from the video playing on repeat in my mind. Around 3 in the morning, a strange calm settled over me. I got out of bed, made some coffee, and pulled out all my financial records. For the next 4 hours, I meticulously documented every dollar I had given my family over the past 2 years. Mortgage payments, utility bills, car repairs, medical expenses, Jake's failed business ventures, the vacation to heal, new appliances, groceries, insurance premiums. The total made me gasp: $48,632.41 in just under 2 years. Almost $50,000 I had handed over without question, without complaint, while working myself to exhaustion. Money that could have been my house down payment, my advanced degree, my future. And for what? To be called selfish, controlling, cold, the last resort. As dawn broke outside my window, something broke inside me as well. Not my heart, though, that was certainly damaged. No, what broke was the chain of obligation that had been slowly strangling me. In its place grew something new, a determination to reclaim my life, my finances, and my self-respect. The week after discovering the video was one of the most emotionally turbulent periods of my life. I felt like I was moving through a thick fog, going through the motions at work, while my mind constantly replayed the cruel words and laughter from my family. I avoided my mother and brother entirely, not trusting myself to speak to them without falling apart. Their texts and calls went unanswered. "Kelly, can you transfer the utility money today? Sis, my car insurance is due, don't forget." Each message now read like an entitled demand rather than a request, and it made my stomach turn. During quiet moments at the hospital, I found myself diving deep into reflection about our family dynamics. This betrayal hadn't come from nowhere. Looking back, I could see patterns that stretched all the way to my childhood. I remembered my 10th birthday, when I'd received a book and a small cake, while months later Jake's birthday warranted a backyard party with 20 kids and a professional magician. I recalled how my straight A report cards received cursory praise, while Jake's C- in math was celebrated with ice cream because he tried so hard. In high school, I worked weekends at a local diner to save for college while maintaining a 4.0 GPA. Jake played video games and was given an allowance. When I got into nursing school with a partial scholarship, my father was proud, but my mother's first question was, "Will you be able to come home on weekends to help around the house?" Dr. Morgan, a therapist I started seeing through the hospital's employee assistance program, helped me see the bigger picture. "What you're describing is a family system where you were assigned the role of responsible caretaker very early," she explained during our second session. "Your brother was assigned a different role, one where less was expected of him. These patterns become deeply ingrained and often persist into adulthood." "But why?" I asked, dabbing at tears with a tissue. "Why put so much on one child and so little on another?" "Family systems are complex," she said gently. "Sometimes it's about gender expectations. Sometimes it's about which child seems more naturally capable or resilient. Often it's completely unconscious on the parent's part. But recognizing the pattern is the first step toward changing your role in it." At work, the emotional weight became too heavy to bear alone. During a particularly difficult shift, I broke down in the supply closet, sobbing uncontrollably as I tried to restock gauze bandages. My colleague Amelia found me there and immediately pulled me into an empty break room. "Talk to me," she said, handing me a cup of water. "This isn't like you, Kelly." The whole story came tumbling out: my father's death, moving back the financial support, the video, the betrayal. Amelia listened without interrupting, her face growing increasingly concerned. "Kelly, what they're doing is financial abuse," she said when I finished. "If this was a romantic relationship, you'd recognize it immediately. Just because they're family doesn't make it okay." Her words hit me like a thunderbolt. Financial abuse. I'd seen it in patients recognize the signs professionally, but somehow hadn't applied that framework to my own situation. Meanwhile, the ignored calls from my family became more frequent and more demanding. My mother left a voicemail that perfectly encapsulated the entitled attitude I'd been blind to. "Kelly, the mortgage is due on Friday, and the power bill came in higher than expected. I need you to transfer the money tomorrow at the latest. Also, Jake needs new tires for his car. Call me back." No, please. No, thank you. No acknowledgement that I had been silent for days. Just expectations and demands. I made an appointment with Marcus, a financial advisor recommended by Amelia. He reviewed my depleted savings and current financial obligations with a professionally neutral expression that nonetheless couldn't quite hide his shock. "You've been supporting 3 adults on one income during a pandemic while working in healthcare," he clarified, looking over his glasses at me. "Yes," I said simply. "And you have no legal obligation to provide this support." "No. My brother is 29 and my mother is 58 and employed, just not full-time." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "Kelly, I'm going to be blunt. If you continue on this path, you'll have no retirement savings, no emergency fund, and no assets to your name by the time you're 40. Is that the future you want?" It wasn't. Of course it wasn't. With Marcus, I developed a financial recovery plan. With Dr. Morgan, I explored 3 possible approaches to my family situation: direct confrontation, gradual withdrawal of support, or a clean break. None felt exactly right. Confrontation would likely lead to more manipulation and guilt trips. Gradual withdrawal would give them time to increase demands before support ended. A clean break felt too harsh, too abrupt, despite their betrayal. I needed time alone to think. So on my next day off, I drove to Silver Lake, a quiet spot where my father used to take me fishing. The early morning air was crisp mist rising off the water as the sun began to warm the day. I sat on the end of the wooden dock, my feet dangling above the water, and tried to hear my father's voice in my mind. "Stand your ground, Kelly Bean," he would say whenever I faced a difficult situation. "Know your worth and don't let anyone tell you different." Would he have wanted me to sacrifice everything for family? Or would he have wanted me to establish healthy boundaries? The father I remembered, the man who taught me to bait my own hook and change my own tire, who celebrated my independence and strength, would never have wanted me to be used and discarded. With sudden clarity, I realized the truth: my family wouldn't change unless circumstances forced them to change. As long as I remained their safety net, they would continue to take and take and take all, while resenting me for being in a position to give. I couldn't control their behavior or their opinions, but I could control mine. I could act with dignity and self-respect while still protecting myself from further exploitation. On the drive home, I formulated a plan, not one born from anger, though I certainly felt that emotion strongly. Not one designed to punish, though consequences would naturally follow, but a plan to reclaim my life while giving my family the opportunity to reclaim theirs, to stand on their own feet rather than on my back. I would act with clarity and purpose, not from pure emotion. I would be strategic, not reactive. Most importantly, I would maintain my own integrity throughout the process, regardless of how they chose to respond. By the time I pulled into my apartment parking lot, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. For the first time in 2 years, I was choosing myself, and it felt like coming home to who I really was. My plan began with concrete action. That evening, I created a detailed spreadsheet of all my financial contributions to my family over the past 2 years. Every mortgage payment, utility bill, car repair, medical expense, and loan was meticulously documented with dates and amounts. I attached receipts, bank statements, and transfer confirmations. The document was both irrefutable evidence and a symbolic representation of my awakening. The next morning, I consulted with Howard, a family lawyer recommended by Dr. Morgan. I needed to understand any legal entanglements that might exist and ensure I was protecting myself properly. "Based on what you've shared, you have no legal obligation to continue supporting your mother or brother," Howard confirmed after reviewing my situation. "The support you've provided was voluntary, and you can legally cease that support at any time without notice." "What about the utilities in my name at my mother's house?" I asked. "You'll want to transfer those back to her name or close the accounts," he advised. Otherwise, you remain legally responsible for payment. Howard helped me develop a checklist of financial ties to sever removing my name from accounts, transferring utilities, canceling automatic payments, and documenting everything. The most important thing, he emphasized, is to communicate your intentions clearly and in writing. This protects you if they later claim they were blindsided or that you agreed to continue support. Armed with legal advice, I began quietly separating our finances. I called utility companies to remove my name from accounts after paying the current bills one last time. I canceled automatic transfers to my mother's bank account. I contacted Jake's car insurance company to remove myself as the payment guarantor. Simultaneously, I searched for a new apartment across town, far enough away to create physical distance, but still within commuting range of the hospital. I found a sunny one-bedroom with a small balcony in a secure building. The rent was actually less than what I had been paying for my current place, plus the majority of my mother's mortgage. I signed the lease that day and began moving essential items when I knew my family would be occupied elsewhere. On the third day of my move, I was carrying a box of books to my car when Jake pulled into the parking lot. He parked haphazardly across two spaces and approached with a confused expression. "What are you doing? Mom's been trying to call you for days," he said, looking at the box in my arms. "Are you moving?" "What the hell, Kelly?" I set the box down carefully in my trunk before turning to face him. Without a word, I took out my phone, found the video, and held it up for him to see. His face went pale as he recognized what it was, then flushed with embarrassment as the cruel comments played out. "You weren't supposed to see that," he said when it ended, as if that somehow made it better. "That's your response?" I asked, my voice steady despite the anger and hurt swirling inside me. Not, "I'm sorry we said those horrible things, but you weren't supposed to see it." Jake shifted uncomfortably, looking anywhere but at my face. "Look, we were just venting. Everyone needs to vent sometimes. It didn't mean anything." "It meant everything, Jake," I said, closing my trunk with a definitive thud. "It showed me exactly what you all think of me despite everything I've done for this family. It showed me that no matter how much I give, it will never be enough." "So what, you're just leaving, abandoning Mom when she needs you? Real mature Kelly." He scoffed quickly, shifting to the defensive attack that had worked so well in the past. But I was immune now. I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm simply stopping the financial support that was supposed to be temporary, but has become expected. Mom has a job. You're a capable adult. Figure it out. We can't afford the mortgage without your help. You know that. Then sell the house and find something affordable, I said simply. That's what responsible adults do when they can't afford their expenses. He stared at me as if I'd started speaking in tongues. The concept seemed completely foreign to him, which only confirmed I was making the right decision. "Dad would be so disappointed in you." He tried playing the ultimate card. I smiled sadly. "No, Jake. Dad would be disappointed in how you and Mom have treated me. He raised us both to stand on our own 2 feet, but somewhere along the way you forgot that lesson. Maybe now you'll remember." I got into my car and drove away, leaving him standing open-mouthed in the parking lot. It was the first time in my adult life I had directly stood up to my brother without backing down or compromising, and the feeling was both terrifying and exhilarating. The end of the month arrived, bringing with it the due dates for the mortgage, utilities, and other bills my family had grown accustomed to me paying. I had sent a brief, clear email to both my mother and Jake the day after my encounter in the parking lot. "I will no longer be providing financial support. All accounts have been transferred back to your names. This decision is final. I am open to having a relationship that doesn't involve money, but I need time and space right now." The first panicked call came from my mother 3 days before the mortgage was due. "Kelly, there's a notice from the bank about the mortgage. I checked my account and your transfer isn't there. There must be some mistake with the bank." "There's no mistake," I said calmly. "As I explained in my email, I'm no longer providing financial support." A long pause followed. Then, "But how am I supposed to pay it? You know I can't afford it on my salary." "I'm sure you'll figure it out," I said, echoing the dismissive phrase she had used countless times when I expressed being overwhelmed with work and family obligations. The calls and texts escalated over the next few days, following a predictable pattern: confusion, anger, accusations, and finally pleading. Jake threatened to tell the whole family I was abandoning my mother. My mother invoked my father's memory repeatedly, claiming he would be heartbroken at my cruelty. I maintained calm, brief responses without engaging emotionally. "My decision is final. This isn't open for negotiation." I'm not discussing this further. Meanwhile, at work, I learned about a leadership position opening in the emergency department. The role would involve more administrative duties, better hours, and a significant pay increase. Before, I would have dismissed the opportunity, knowing I couldn't commit to additional responsibilities while supporting my family. Now I began working on my application with enthusiasm. An unexpected support network emerged during this time. Amelia and other coworkers invited me for dinners and movie nights. My neighbor Barbara, a retired teacher who had always waved from her balcony, brought me a houseplant for my new apartment and stayed for tea. Old friends from nursing school reached out after seeing my social media posts about my new place. I began to rebuild a life that was truly mine, one decision, one day at a time. And though the hurt from my family's betrayal remained, it was gradually overshadowed by a growing sense of liberation and possibility. The inevitable confrontation came 3 weeks after I moved to my new apartment. I had just returned home from a shift at the hospital when I saw my mother's car parked in the visitor's space with Jake sitting in the passenger seat. For a moment, I considered driving past and coming back later, but I knew this conversation needed to happen eventually. I parked and walked toward my building unsurprised when they quickly got out of the car and intercepted me. "We need to talk," my mother said, her eyes red-rimmed and her voice shaking with a mixture of anger and distress. "My apartment or a coffee shop?" I asked calmly, unwilling to have this discussion in a parking lot. "Your apartment," Jake answered. "This is private family business." I led them upstairs in silence. My new place was smaller than my previous apartment, but brighter and more thoughtfully decorated. I had purchased only things that brought me joy, a concept that would have seemed selfish and frivolous to me just weeks before. My mother looked around, her expression darkening, as she took in the new furniture, the artwork on the walls. "I see you can afford nice things for yourself while your family gets eviction notices," she said bitterly. "Would you like some water or tea?" I asked, ignoring the barb. I had prepared for this conversation with Dr. Morgan, anticipating every guilt trip and accusation. "How could you abandon us like this?" My mother's voice broke, tears spilling down her cheeks. "After everything we've been through after losing your father? How could you be so cold?" Jake jumped in before I could respond. "Dad would be ashamed of you right now. He would never have turned his back on family." In the past, these statements would have devastated me, sent me spiraling into guilt and compliance. Now I simply gestured toward my small dining table. "Please sit down. I'd like to show you something." They sat reluctantly, exchanging confused glances. I opened my laptop and pulled up the spreadsheet I had created, then turned it so they could see. "This is a record of all the financial support I've provided over the past 2 years. I explained, my voice even. Nearly $50,000, not including the countless hours of emotional support errands and household help. They stared at the screen, momentarily silenced by the irrefutable numbers. "And this," I said, pulling up the video on my phone and placing it on the table, "is what you really think of that support." I played the video from Aunt Laura's kitchen again, watching their faces as they heard their own cruel words. My mother flinched at certain parts. Jake stared at the floor, unable to meet my eyes. I moved back to help temporarily after Dad died. I continued when the video ended. 2 years and $50,000 later, I'm still the last resort who doesn't do enough. So I'm done. Not because I don't love you, but because this relationship has become unhealthy for all of us. "You're twisting everything." My mother started her denial, immediate and predictable. "We were just having a bad day. Everyone says things they don't mean sometimes." "You meant every word," I replied calmly. "And that's okay. You're entitled to your opinions, but I'm entitled to make decisions based on those opinions." Jake shifted tactics, his expression morphing from defensiveness to a calculated vulnerability I recognized from countless previous manipulations. "Look, we screwed up, we said stupid things, but you can't just cut us off completely. Mom can't pay the mortgage on her own, and my business is still getting established." "Your business has been getting established for 6 years, Jake," I pointed out. "And Mom could pay her own mortgage if she worked full-time and downsized to a more affordable home. So that's it. You're just going to throw us to the wolves." My mother's tears had stopped, replaced by cold anger. "After all I did for you growing up, I'm not throwing anyone anywhere," I said. "I'm simply stepping back and allowing you both to be the capable adults I know you can be, and I'm happy to support you emotionally through that process." "We don't need your condescension," Jake snapped. "We need help with bills." I shook my head. "That's the problem. You don't need my help. You want it. There's a difference. And there are many resources available to you both." I slid a folder across the table, another part of my preparation for this moment. Inside were printouts of job listings in my mother's field that paid better than her current position, information on financial counseling services, details about downsizing the house, and resources for Jake to get actual career counseling, rather than jumping from one get-rich-quick scheme to another. This is real help, I explained. Help that could lead to independence rather than continued dependence. They stared at the folder as if it might bite them. My mother finally picked it up, flipping through the pages with a deepening frown. "There's something else you should know," she said, after a long moment, her voice quiet. "Something we haven't told you." I waited, braced for another manipulation tactic. "We're in more debt than you realize," she admitted. "Your father had a life insurance policy, but it barely covered the funeral and some old medical bills. There were credit cards you didn't know about. And Jake," she glanced at my brother, who looked away. "I have some gambling issues," Jake muttered, still not meeting my eyes. "Online poker. It started after Dad died. I thought I could win enough to help Mom out, but it got out of hand." This new information washed over me. Part of me wanted to leap back into rescue mode to take on these new problems and solve them. The caretaker role was deeply ingrained and comfortable despite its costs. But a stronger part recognized that more money wouldn't solve the underlying issues. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said sincerely. "And I've included resources for gambling addiction support in that folder. I can help you find treatment options, Jake. I can help you negotiate with creditors, Mom. But I won't pay the debts or the mortgage anymore." "So you'll give advice but not actual help," Jake said bitterly. "Support isn't always financial," I replied. "Sometimes the most helpful thing is encouraging someone to solve their own problems." They left shortly after taking the folder, but leaving a thick tension in the air. My mother paused at the door, looking back at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Is this really what you want, Kelly, to turn your back on your family?" "I'm not turning my back on anyone," I said softly. "I'm just refusing to set myself on fire to keep everyone else warm." After they left, I sat on my couch and cried for an hour. Despite their manipulation, despite the video, despite everything, they were still my family, and this separation hurt deeply. But beneath the pain was a growing certainty that I had done the right thing, not just for myself, but ultimately for them too. The week following the confrontation brought silence from my family. Then, as I had predicted, they began spreading their version of events to the extended family. Aunt Laura called, her voice tight with disapproval, to tell me my mother was absolutely devastated by my sudden abandonment. Uncle Phil sent a lengthy text about family obligations and how disappointed my father would be. But something unexpected happened too. My cousin Taylor, of course, stood firmly by my side, bringing dinner to my new apartment and helping me hang curtains. But I also received a surprising call from my father's sister, Aunt Denise, who lived in Florida. "Your mother called me with some story about you abandoning them," she said. "But I know you, Kelly. You're your father's daughter through and through. What's really going on?" I told her everything, including the video which I sent to her with permission to share with other family members who had only heard my mother's version. Aunt Denise was quiet for a long moment after watching it. "Your father would be heartbroken to see how they've treated you," she said finally. "Not the other way around. You did the right thing, honey. And for what it's worth, I'm proud of you." Her support opened a floodgate. Other relatives reached out, some to offer support, others to ask questions. The family narrative began to shift as the full story emerged. Meanwhile, I focused on my own healing and growth. I threw myself into the application for the senior position at the hospital, preparing thoroughly for the interview. I joined a weekly hiking group through a community app, connecting with new people who knew nothing of my family drama and accepted me simply as I was. When Thanksgiving approached, the first holiday season since our estrangement, I felt a complicated mix of emptiness and relief. Taylor invited me to her house, where I was welcomed warmly by her husband and children. We made pies together and played board games, and though I thought of my mother and brother frequently throughout the day, the sharp pain of separation was dulled by the genuine warmth of this alternative family gathering. Then, a week after Thanksgiving, my phone rang with Jake's number. I almost didn't answer, fearing another manipulation attempt, but something told me to take the call. "Kelly?" His voice sounded different, more subdued. "I owe you an apology. A real one, not the bull I tried before." I sat down on my couch, surprised. "I'm listening." "The things I said in that video, the things I've been saying for years, they weren't fair. You've done more for us than anyone could expect, And instead of being grateful, I was resentful because you have your life together and I don't. His words seemed sincere, lacking the calculated quality I'd come to recognize in his previous apologies. I've started going to Gamblers Anonymous, he continued, and I got a job at the tech store at the mall. It's not glamorous, but it's something. I'm staying with a friend until I can afford my own place again. That's great, Jake, I said, genuinely pleased for him. Those are really positive steps. I'm not asking for money, he added quickly. I just wanted you to know that I understand now why you did what you did, and I'm sorry it took this for me to grow up. After we hung up, I sat for a long time thinking about his call. It was the first sign that perhaps my decision had indeed forced positive change, that sometimes the most caring action isn't the easiest or most obvious one. 6 months after I stopped financially supporting my family, the changes in all our lives were remarkable. My mother had finally found full-time employment as an office manager for a local insurance company, a position that paid significantly better than her part-time job at the grocery store. She had also listed the family home for sale, accepting that downsizing to a smaller, more affordable place made financial sense. Jake's transformation was perhaps the most surprising. He continued with his Gamblers Anonymous program, maintaining his job at the tech store, while taking community college courses in computer science. He had moved into a modest apartment with a roommate and was slowly paying down his debts. Our conversations, though still sometimes awkward, had evolved from manipulation and resentment to something approaching mutual respect. My own life had blossomed in ways I hadn't thought possible. I received the promotion to senior nurse practitioner, which came with better hours and a substantial salary increase. I started dating Dominic, an architect I met through my hiking group, who understood and supported my boundaries with my family. Most importantly, I had developed a strong sense of self-worth that wasn't tied to how much I gave or sacrificed for others. I continued therapy with Dr. Morgan, working through the deeply ingrained patterns that had led me to become the family caretaker and enabler. My relationship with Taylor grew even stronger. She had been my rock throughout the entire process, validating my feelings and supporting my decisions even when they were difficult. Through her, I maintained connections with the extended family members who had come to understand and respect my position. The first family gathering I attended after the estrangement was for my cousin's wedding. The tension was palpable when I first encountered my mother across the reception hall. She approached hesitantly, looking older and somehow smaller than I remembered. "You look well, Kelly," she said, her eyes taking in my new dress, my relaxed posture, the happiness that apparently showed on my face. "Thank you," I replied. "You look good too. How's the new job going?" "It's challenging, but in a good way," she admitted. "I should have done it years ago instead of—" She trailed off, but the implication was clear: instead of relying on you. The conversation was brief and surface level, but it was a start. We were finding our way toward a new kind of relationship, one based on adult equality rather than dependency. After the wedding, Taylor linked her arm through mine as we walked to our cars. "You handled that beautifully," she said. "How are you feeling?" "Like I'm finally becoming the person I was always meant to be." I answered honestly. The healing process wasn't linear or simple. There were still difficult moments, misunderstandings, and occasional relapses into old patterns. I participated in a support group for family financial abuse, where I learned I was far from alone in my experience. So many others had found themselves in the role of family ATM, their generosity taken for granted and their boundaries disrespected. One rainy Sunday morning, I received a handwritten letter from my mother. Unlike her previous communications, which had been full of guilt trips and indirect accusations, this letter contained something I had never expected: a genuine apology. "I've been thinking a lot about our relationship over the years," she wrote. "After your father died, I was lost and afraid, and I took advantage of your strength and generosity. Instead of being grateful, I resented you for seeing my weakness. The things I said in that video were inexcusable, and I'm truly sorry for the pain I caused. I understand now that you needed to step back, not just for yourself, but for me too. I had forgotten how to stand on my own feet." The letter continued, acknowledging specific instances of taking me for granted and expressing genuine remorse. It wasn't perfect, and years of hurt couldn't be erased by a single letter, but it was a meaningful step toward healing. I began cautiously rebuilding relationships with my family, maintaining clear boundaries while opening myself to new, healthier connections. We had occasional dinners, brief phone calls, and gradually found our way to a new normal that respected everyone's independence and dignity. On a bright spring morning, almost exactly a year after Taylor sent me the video, I signed the papers on my own home, a modest but beautiful two-bedroom house with a garden in the back where I planned to grow vegetables like my father had taught me. As I accepted the keys from the realtor, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment and peace. That evening, I sat on my new back porch watching the sunset and reflecting on everything that had happened. The painful video had been a blessing in disguise, forcing me to confront a situation that was hurting everyone involved. By setting boundaries and allowing my family to experience the natural consequences of their choices, I had given them the opportunity to grow into their best selves. Forgiveness, I had learned, didn't mean erasing consequences or pretending the hurt never happened. It meant releasing the anger that bound me to the past and moving forward with wisdom and self-respect. It meant recognizing that sometimes walking away is the greatest act of love you can offer both to yourself and to those who have become dependent on you in unhealthy ways. My phone buzzed with a text from Dominic, asking if I needed help unpacking tomorrow. I smiled, grateful for the new relationships I had built since reclaiming my life. The journey hadn't been easy, and there would undoubtedly be challenges ahead. But I had learned perhaps the most valuable lesson of all: loving yourself enough to set boundaries isn't selfish. It's the foundation for all healthy relationships. And sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the most beautiful destinations. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with people you love? What did you learn from the experience? Share your story in the comments. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, you deserve to be valued not just for what you give, but for who you are. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the courage to honor your own worth every single day.